Headlines. President Park Geun-hye flies over to New York after wrapping up her state visit to Canada with the Korea-Canada Free Trade Agreement in her hands. She's set to address the UN Climate Summit later in the day. Also scheduled on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York are high-level talks on North Korea's human rights violations. North Korea's request to participate in the meeting is denied. And U.S. airstrikes begin targeting Islamic State strongholds in Syria, expanding American involvement beyond Iraq. Hello, welcome to ARIRANG News. Good to have you with us tonight. We begin in Canada. It was a historic Monday in Ottawa in terms of bilateral ties between South Korea and Canada as the two countries signed a free trade agreement. And our presidential office correspondent Choi You-sun reports it was not the only deal inked between the two countries.
9 years after launching trade negotiations, Korea and Canada signed their free trade agreement on Monday.
FTA 효과가 교역, 투자 분야를 넘어 기술 협력, 인적 교류, 민간 경제 협력 등 제반 분야로 파급이 돼서 양국의 경제 협력이 한 단계 도약할 수 있도록.
With the FTA signing, President Park Geun-hye and Prime Minister Stephen Harper elevated their relations to a strategic partnership, placing a greater emphasis on their political and economic cooperation and mutual trust. Seoul and Ottawa set global peace and co-prosperity as their shared goals. The two partnering nations sealed a number of other deals to increase cross-sharing of advanced technologies. For instance, Korea will offer up its know-how in IT-based new energy industries, such as the smart grid and energy storage systems, in return for Canada's shale gas and oil sands exploration and development technologies.
We pushed for a memorandum of understanding to expand from cooperation in our strong clean energy technology to that of Canada's oil technology.
President Park and Prime Minister Harper will also expand their working holiday program to encourage more people-to-people exchanges. The Korean president also secured Ottawa's support for her North Korea policies. President Park is now in New York to carry out multilateral diplomacy at the United Nations. At Tuesday's UN Climate Summit, she will speak about building a growth engine out of the global problem by converging IT with culture and other sectors in a creative economy. Choi You-sun, ARIRANG News, New York.
And a meeting on North Korea's human rights record will take place on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly on Tuesday, New York time. Pyongyang's request to join this high-level talks has been pretty much denied. Kim Min-ji has more.
A high-level meeting discussing North Korea's human rights violations will be held on Tuesday local time on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York. The meeting, which will be presided by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, will be attended by South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se as well as diplomats from the European Union and Japan. The dire human rights situation in Pyongyang has come under greater international attention this year following the release of a report by the UN Commission of Inquiry that accuses North Korea's leaders of widespread, systematic and gross human rights violations. Kerry is expected to condemn North Korea's human rights abuses, focusing on its political prison camps, and he will also likely bring up the issue of the 3 Americans detained in the north. The meeting is aimed at garnering support for a UN resolution on the issue. Pyongyang is also asked to attend the meeting. The North Korean ambassador to the UN, Ta Sung-nam, said the North was waiting for an answer.
We told the U.S. that we will attend the talks. If the meeting is focused on North Korean issues, we should attend. We are waiting for an answer from Washington. If they really want to solve this issue through dialogue, we see no reason why they will turn us down.
However, the ambassador struck a more negative tone in regards to a potential meeting between the foreign ministers of the two Koreas on the sidelines of the UN gathering. He said talks should be held in Korea and not in a foreign country or international organization, as they are from the same country. North Korea sent its Foreign Minister Lee Soo-young and Vice Foreign Minister to New York. Lee will address the General Assembly later this week. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
South Korea has once again urged North Korea to come to the talks rather than giving out one-way statements. This in response to North Korea condemning South Korean civic activists' launch of anti-Pyongyang leaflets across the border on Sunday. Pyongyang issued a statement Monday calling the act a challenge to their efforts for improving inter-Korean relations. An official at Seoul's Unification Ministry clarified the South Korean government's stance again, which is that all pending issues between the two Koreas, including the flying of those leaflets, can be resolved through dialogue. Meanwhile, North Korea's Supreme People's Assembly is set to meet later this week for the second time this year. The Legislative Assembly will begin on Thursday, and attention is on whether new reform measures will be introduced this time around. This, as the regime has been reportedly introducing new economic policies that give more incentives to the working class. Also being watched, though, is whether North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will attend the Assembly meeting. He has not been seen at official events for about 3 weeks now, fueling speculation about possible health issues.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world, join Kang Chae-ri for a lively half hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on ARIRANG TV.
Human Rights Council headquarters in Geneva on Thursday, finding ways to persuade. Apple's first weekend sales numbers for the new iPhone 6 as well as 6 Plus are out, and they have topped last year's records set by its own 5C and 5S models. And analysts say Apple will have even more to celebrate when the new gadgets hit the Chinese market. Connie Kim tells us more.
Apple enthusiasts cheered delight as they rushed into an Apple store in New York to be the first to get their hands on the newly launched iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus. One Apple fan holds up his prized new iPhone after camping out since early in the morning.
Big hands need a big phone. That's it, you know? No, actually, the better camera, longer battery life.
I'm most excited about the Apple Pay, be able to pay without having to take out my wallet.
Apple says it has smashed its sales record for an opening weekend of a new iPhone model, delivering 10 million iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus in the first 3 days of sale. This tally beats the previous record set last year when Apple sold 9 million iPhone 5C and 5S. The record streak is expected to take another huge leap forward when the new iPhones hit the Chinese market, Apple's most lucrative market. The U.S. tech giant's new handsets are reportedly being sold at up to 3 times the retail price in Beijing's black markets. The battle between Apple and Samsung will reach boiling point next week when the Korean firm rolls out its Galaxy Note 4 in Korea and the U.S. Meanwhile, local brokerage firms are slashing Samsung Electronics' third-quarter profit earnings, citing the firm's slowing smartphone business. Samsung Securities says it expects Samsung Electronics to post a third-quarter operating profit of $4.5 billion, down $1 billion from a projection made early this month. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Japan has been embracing its weakened currency with open arms, but concerns are being raised about the effect it could have on Korean exporters, with the won trading near at its strongest level in 6 years against the Japanese yen. Hwang Jie has the details.
The weakening Japanese yen has emerged as a real threat to Korean automakers. Look at the second quarter performance of Korea's #1 auto group and compare it to that of their Japanese rivals. Experts agree that the country's auto industry remains vulnerable to exchange rate change.
I think the global consumer perception is that Japanese cars generally have a better quality. And the Hyundai has price competitiveness. So in this case, because Hyundai does not have the consumers' confidence, that they are going to be very much affected by changes in prices due to the exchange rates.
For the past 3 years, the Korean won strengthened by over 35% against the Japanese currency and is now trading near its strongest level in 6 years. This depreciation in the yen has been gaining traction on the back of the strong dollar trend, following forecasts of a potential rate hike by the Federal Reserve over the next few years. And when the pace of the yen weakening against the greenback has been faster than that of the Korean won, it's put an even stronger upward pressure on the local currency. Korean policymakers are also becoming increasingly concerned that the weak yen trend could hurt local exporters.
If Japanese companies start lowering costs based on the improved profitability they get from the weak yen trend, it will have a major negative impact on Korea's exports.
Now, for investors, Korea's next rate-setting session set for mid-October is something to keep an eye on to see whether the weak yen trend will stick out as a major factor when policymakers consider lowering the key interest rate. 황지혜, 아리랑 뉴스.
The gender gap in Korean workplaces is certainly narrowing. New data shows that women in their 20s and 30s are more active economically these days. Shin Se-min with more.
There's one group in which Korean women are more active in their labor force than their male counterparts, that being those in their 20s. Nearly 65% of women in their 20s were engaged in the labor force by either having a job or actively seeking employment in the second quarter of this year. That's about 3 percentage points higher than the so-called labor participation rate for men in the age group. Many women in their 30s drop out of workforce after they get married, but nearly 59% of them stayed in the labor market in the second quarter. It is the highest rate since 2000 when the data was first collected. That said, there is much work to be done. According to a recent report by Korea's National Assembly Research Service, Korea's income gender gap is widest in the developed world. Statistics compiled by the OECD show that it was 39% in 2010 in terms of full-time employee wages. The government has been seeking measures to level the playing field, with a recent report from the Korean Women's Development Institute saying the lag in the economic participation rate of women had created roughly $192 billion in social costs over the past 13 years. Shin Se-min, 아리랑 뉴스.
And there's another goal the government is pushing for, enriching the Koreas with more cultural content. That vision is apparently being reflected in next year's budget. Our Park Ji-won has the details.
The Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism unveiled its budget plans for 2015 Tuesday. The final number will come in at more than $4.5 billion. And while that's just 1.3% of the government's overall spending of $360 billion next year, it represents a more than a 10% increase from this year and the biggest boost among all ministries. The tourism, sports and arts and culture sectors will make up slightly more than a quarter of the total culture budget each, followed by the contents industry at around 12%. By subsector, the sports and contents industry will see the largest rate of growth. That's partly due to preparations for the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics in 2018. The contents industry, which includes film, music, games, and animations, will see more than 18% increase to nearly $590 million next year, as the incumbent administration sees it as a growth engine for the creative economy. The Park administration has vowed to increase the annual cultural budget to an OECD average level of about 2% of total government spending by 2017. Park Ji-won, 아리랑 뉴스.
The United States and several Arab countries have begun launching airstrikes on Islamic State targets, this time in Syria. For more, we turn to Paul Lee at the News Center. Paul, these attacks began in the early morning hours, local time that is. Has there been any word yet on the aftermath?
Well, human rights monitors in Syria say 2 IS positions have been completely destroyed near their stronghold in Raqqa province. And in the latest development, 30 al-Qaeda militants were said to be killed in a separate assault in Aleppo. It marks further escalation in U.S.-led efforts to counter what Washington has described as a global terror threat. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The United States and its allies have started airstrikes in Syria, in line with U.S. President Barack Obama's pledge to degrade and destroy the militant group that calls itself the Islamic State. The airstrikes early Tuesday morning in Syria targeted a number of areas, including in and around the Syrian province of Raqqa, which is an IS stronghold. Pentagon Press Secretary Rear Admiral John Kirby said fighter and bomber jets were used in the initial onslaught to clear 20 IS targets. These include buildings that are believed to be used as command and control headquarters for the militant group, as well as training and resupply centers. A number of Arab nations participated in the strikes, including Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Qatar, and Bahrain. While the Syrian government was given advance notice of the airstrikes, they have not provided formal consent for them. Around 2/3 of the Islamic State militant groups, an estimated 30,000 fighters, are based in Syria, while the rest are scattered throughout large parts of northern Iraq. Over recent months, they have claimed wide swaths of land throughout the area, leaving a bloody trail of destruction in their wake. For the last several weeks, the U.S. has conducted surveillance flights over the region. According to the U.S. Central Command, the United States has launched 190 airstrikes in Iraq since August. These represent the first in Syria. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
And coming back to Asia, Paul, a court in China has sentenced one of the country's leading scholars to life in prison for crimes against the state. This case has been condemned by the West as well as human rights groups. What's been the reaction like to this latest ruling?
Well, Amnesty International has called the verdict deplorable, while the U.S., EU, and the United Nations have called for the immediate release of Ilma Tohti, who is China's leading advocate for the rights of the Muslim Uyghur people. Tohti was given a life sentence on Tuesday after being found guilty of separatism charges in the western region of Xinjiang. The court ruled that he had used his position as an economic professor in Beijing to incite ethnic violence. His defense lawyer, however, said his client was the latest victim of the government's crackdown on dissent.
As his defense lawyer, I think this is totally unacceptable. He also said he is innocent. He will definitely appeal. Based on the wording of the verdict, I think that this is extremely politicized.
Following the global backlash, Beijing's foreign ministry said that the relevant case was handled according to the rule of law and that it opposes any foreign interference in the country's judicial integrity and sovereignty.
So if he appeals, then it continues to be a development that we need to keep an eye on. And in the U.S., prosecutors say a man who tried to break into the White House last week, remember him, he had more than 800 rounds of ammunition and other weapons stored in his car. This was a decorated Iraq War veteran. Do we know what his motive was at this point?
Well, during a court hearing on Monday, prosecutors say Omar Gonzalez confessed he was concerned that the atmosphere was collapsing and felt he urgently needed to get the information to the president. The 42-year-old was arrested on Friday night by officers after breaching the White House grounds. Authorities found he was carrying a knife and had gone through by scaling a fence, raising questions about the Secret Service's security procedures. However, following the incident, President Barack Obama expressed his confidence in the agency.
Secret Service does a great job. Thank you. I'm grateful for the sacrifices they make on my behalf and my family's behalf.
Gonzalez faces charges of illegally entering a restricted building while carrying a deadly weapon, which carries a sentence of up to 10 years in prison. He was previously arrested this past July by police while carrying a sniper rifle and a map marking the presidential office.
So he does have a record from the past. And finally, the iconic beer festival, Oktoberfest, has kicked off in Germany with millions of beer lovers across the globe celebrating the event. And Paul, I did some digging. Last year, more than 6 million people drinking 6.7 million liters of beer and eating more than 114 oxen. Do tell us how this year's event is shaping up.
Well, the German city of Munich opened its grand tradition of hosting Oktoberfest, which is dubbed as the largest, rowdiest, and most famous beer affair in the world. The 181st Oktoberfest officially kicked off on Saturday, with Munich Mayor Dieter Reiter tapping the first beer keg for the Bavarian state premiere. Organizers say almost 1/5 of visitors travel from abroad to enjoy the annual festivities and the some 150 different drinks. But city officials say the event is for all people of all ages to dance and sing the hours away.
The atmosphere is what it's all about. The people having fun and going home in peace.
I'm coming from Slovenia and I'm first time here, and like you see, I went to the shop and I just buy these clothes just for today.
The festival is expected to bring in more than €1 billion to the local economy, with around 7 million liters of beer consumed during the 2-week party, which will come to a close on October 5th. Charity?
All right, definitely looks like loads of fun. Wish we could be there. All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Paul, for those stories, and we'll see you back here in just about 2 hours.
Hello and welcome to your Asian Games update at this hour. Let's get right into some medal events from day 4 at Incheon, starting with the men's artistic gymnastics individual all-around final. South Korea's Lee Sang-wook shortly held the top spot after the first 2 apparatus, but Japan's Yuya Kamoto and teammate Masayoshi Yamamoto quickly rebounded. And that's how it ended up, with Japan winning gold and silver and Lee Sang-wook earning the bronze medal. The women's event is going on at this moment. And moving on, South Korea showed off its horse training expertise in the men's intermediate individual dressage freestyle finals of equestrian. Korea's master rider Hwang Young-sik and his trusty steed Furstenberg dazzled the judges for the gold medal days after taking the team gold on Saturday. Fellow national Kim Dong-sun got the silver. And in shooting, Team China continued to stack up the medals. This time, its sharpshooters took gold in the men's 10-meter air rifle team event. Chinese trio outshot South Korea's Kim Sang-do, Kim Hyun-jun, and Han Jin-sup, winning by a comfortable margin. South Koreans took the silver. Meanwhile, Hao Ran-yang and Yi Fei-kao also added a gold and silver in the individual finals. Meanwhile, new records were set in women's weightlifting, 64-kilo division that is, with Chinese Taipei's Lin Su-chi setting the bar. The Taiwanese star snatched 116 kilos, which was an all-time Asian Games best. And in the clean and jerk, she lifted 145 kilos for a total score of 261, both of which were good enough for new world records and a gold medal. And finally, to squash for the men's and women's individual finals. For the men, Abdullah Al-Mazayan brought home Kuwait's first gold medal in the Asiad, winning 3-2. Meanwhile, in the all-Malaysian women's individual final, David Nicole Ann beat out Lo Wee Wern 3-1 for the country's second gold medal at the Games. And South Korea's second gold of the day came in fencing, the women's fencing saber team finals, while the men won gold as well in the épée finals. And just a reminder, the 400-meter freestyle finals are on soon in swimming with Park Tae-won in the pool, so don't miss that. Well, that's all I have for now. This has been Stephen Che. I'll see you back here later with more after 10.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather updates. At the moment, it is raining down in the southern part of the country. Now, this is because of side effects of typhoon, which has downgraded to a low-pressure trough waters near Shanghai, China at around 6 p.m. It looks like typhoon left behind rain clouds here in Korea. On Wednesday, expect heavy rainfall nationwide. Now, coastal areas are looking at more than 150, while most regions could get up to 100. Be aware as the rainfall will be accompanied by strong winds, and overall Wednesday is shaping up to be wet and stormy. Conditions over in Incheon will be no exception with rain forecast all day, so hopefully the rain won't affect outdoor activities too much. Here are the readings for Wednesday. Seoul hits 24, Gwangju and Busan 25. On to other places. Daejeon makes it to 23, Jeju 27. That's all for now. I'll be back with more updates after 10.
And that will do it for this edition of ID9 News. Thanks for watching.